Over Freddy Peralta's last 9 starts, he has a 2.01 ERA and a .75 WHIP. League winner. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Wednesday, September 13th. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. Today on the show, Trea Turner and Matt Olson. They both just did it again. Guys are on fire, smacking home runs. We'll talk about those two. Freddy Peralta, in my opinion, has been a league winner in the second half. Elly De La Cruz has been the opposite, and much more. Before we get started, help us out by liking this video and subscribing on YouTube if you haven't already. And if you're listening on the audio side, download, follow, and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify. Let's jump in. Get out of here! Come on! All right, Scott, you are up. Player of the night.
I'm going to go with Edward Cabrera. Edward Cabrera, I'm not even really sure how to classify his outing here at Milwaukee. He did follow an opener again in his second outing back from the IL. Followed a couple openers last time out. And he looked, it was a mixed bag. He looked good enough that we can't dismiss him as a viable fantasy option down the stretch. He allowed 1 hit in 4 2/3 innings. Also allowed 1 hit in that previous outing against the Dodgers. He struck out 5 in 4 2/3 innings. Did allow 2 earned runs. Walked 6 though. So I've called Mackenzie Gore. I've kind of labeled him Charizard for the extreme highs and lows that his kind of erratic pitching makes for. But Cabrera might be a truer example of that. When he limits the walks, there aren't many pitchers with more upside, but he often doesn't limit the walks. And these last 2 outings put that dichotomy on full display. Through 68.1% of his pitches for strikes in that Dodgers outing, through just 55.8% of his pitches for strikes in this Brewers outing. The reason why, despite the concerns over his control and despite the general unpredictability, I mean, let's be honest, general unpredictability has defined the entire pitcher position this year. But in spite of that, for Edward Cabrera, the reason why I think he's worth picking up for the final 2 weeks of the season is his remaining matchups. Presuming everybody stays on turn. Next week, he's going to line up for 2 against the Mets and the Brewers, 2 good matchups. And then the final week of the season, Edward Cabrera is going to get the Pirates. So I actually went through and was working on a column like players you can pick up for championship week, whether your championship week is the second to last week of the season or the very last week of the season. And Edward Cabrera was kind of setting off alarm bells with those matchups as one of the players who's going to be prominently featured in that article. It is, a bit of a, you're playing with fire a bit because of the way those walks come and go. But if nothing else, he's worth picking up just so your opponent doesn't pick him up and then get an 11 strikeout game against you. Even if you're not, even if your pitching is good enough that, okay, I don't really need to bother with Edward Cabrera, it's still probably worth picking him up just for defensive reasons.
So I thought it was interesting you chose Edward Cabrera just to highlight these matchups, which I get. I mean, it sounds like they're great down the stretch here. I had a segment planned for later on. What does the future hold for Edward Cabrera? Because he was a pitcher that I loved coming into the season. I think he has incredible stuff. I think it was like 3 secondary pitches with a 30% whiff rate or better coming into the year. And there's no doubt, like, he has great stuff. He can get strikeouts. I looked at his batting average against this year. It's 210. In his career, it's 203. Limiting hits, that's something that Edward Cabrera does really well. 6.3 walks per 9 this season. That is second highest among pitchers with at least 80 innings this season. So I just think it's untenable with the control. I mean, I get those matchups, but 4th time that he's had 6 or more walks this season, and he did it in only 4 2/3 innings. Like, maybe I'm just being harder on him because I rostered him a lot and I was excited about him this year and I kind of been burned, but I don't know. I don't think that I would be able to trust it. I get why you would want to. But
yeah,
my original question, Scott,
trust probably isn't the right word. we are in the unfortunate position of having to recommend bad players in pivotal moments, and that doesn't mean everybody should follow through on those recommendations. Hopefully most people don't have to, and that's why I framed it more as a defensive measure, picking up Edward Cabrera, just to put that out there. I know you were building to a different point, but I'm not going to say Edward Cabrera, like if whip is your primary concern over the final 2 weeks, then there's absolutely no way you can start him. I agree with that.
Right. And we'll talk about a few other pitchers that I think I like more. Some guys that could be available. Brian Wu, Cal Quantrill has some good matchups coming up as well. What do you think the future holds, Scott? I know this does not pertain to this season at all, but with control this bad, but stuff this good, it kind of feels like sticking him in the bullpen or even, I don't know, in a closer role or something. I think they're going to give him another chance to start probably at least next year. He's still too young, but
yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like maybe the bullpen is where he winds up long term.
I mean, maybe. I've seen players make bigger developmental leaps than this one. We do have to remember he's had about a season's worth of innings. He just got over 180 innings for his career with this outing. So he's still pretty early in his major league career. Last year in 14 starts, he issued 4.1 walks per 9 innings, which is manageable if you're going to be one of the best strikeout pitchers in the game. I think it's too early to condemn him to the bullpen. He's going to have better than 6 walks per 9. I don't know. The potential NL Cy Young winner has pretty close to 6 walks per 9 this year, but Blake Snell is obviously an outlier in being that good despite that high of a walk rate. I mean, Edward Cabrera is going to have to throw strikes with more consistency. As I pointed out with that Dodgers outing with if you look at Edward Cabrera's game log, it's usually like 1 or 2 walks or 5 or 6 walks and not a lot in between. So he's shown one outing at a time that he can command the strike zone. And so I think it's a possibility, but he has to, he's not a finished product, clearly. If he is a finished product, then you're right. He can't last in the starting rotation.
And I hope I'm wrong because I'm rooting for Edward Cabrera. I think he's awesome. Let's talk about my player of the night here. And I've got Freddy Peralta. Not much actionable here, but I guess just highlighting really, truly how great he has been recently. Another masterful start against the Marlins. 6 1/3 innings, 1 run allowed, 9 strikeouts to 0 walks, 20 swinging strikes on 95 pitches, 9 on the slider, 7 on the fastball, 3 on the changeup, 1 on the curve. Limiting hard contact in this one. His curveball velocity was up 1.5 miles per hour here. And something I've noticed recently is he's throwing his changeup more. So less fastballs in this start, nearly doubled his changeup usage. 4 starts in a row where his changeup usage is up over 20%. So it's been a pretty good pitch for him this year. 224 batting average against, 30% whiff rate entering this start. The slider and curve are better, but a big problem for Freddy Peralta this year was giving up hard contact, giving up home runs. So if this changeup is helping him get left-handed batters out, then yeah, it feels like that might have been the missing piece here. Of course, he's been better than just these last 4 starts where the changeup usage has been up, but just those numbers once again, last 9 starts, 2.01 ERA, 0.75 whip, 82 strikeouts over 53 2/3 innings. He has allowed 29 hits in 53 2/3 innings over this 9-start stretch. He's been amazing, Scott. Any thoughts on Freddy Peralta?
He has been amazing, and at just the right time. There's been so little reliability within the pitcher ranks, so you're always waiting when a guy has a run this good for that 8-run outing to kind of mess it all up, and maybe it'll still come. But if you can't rely on Freddy Peralta right now, you obviously can't rely on anybody. Interestingly, I did trade for him at the very start of this run in an NL-only league where I was in second place. So deep league, you would think the impact of Freddy Peralta's performance would be even greater. I traded for him when I was in second place. I'm still in second place. So he hasn't, because it being an NL-only league, I've also had pitchers like Yohan Adon in there. And that is the frustrating thing that is a frustrating thing about roto leagues, particularly in this boomer bust environment for pitchers, where it only takes one bad apple to sink the whole ship, which is a mixed metaphor, I know, but it's like, you're really performing a tightrope walk in that format with pitching more than I can remember in the past. And like, yeah, everybody has to be good. Everybody has to be good, or else your pitching is bad. And so that's what's happened to me in that league, even after acquiring Freddy Peralta.
And something I've noticed in a few of my roto leagues too, which makes it tough, is that if you're chasing counting stats, if you're chasing strikeouts and wins, you want to throw more starting pitchers
Yeah.
out there, right? 2-star pitchers, but then you kind of expose yourself to more risk with these guys getting blown up. So it's kind of tough to balance. It's like, do I want to just kind of play caution with the ratios here, but not go after counting stats? Maybe just play relievers or something, but it's tough because then you fall behind in those counting stats. So
I have another roto league where I'm much lower than second place, and my pitching staff consists of guys like Chris Bassett and Jose Barrios and Sandy Alcantara, a bunch of pitchers like that who we think of as good pitchers, but they've had their share of duds this year, like really bad starts. And so I'm just buried in the pitching categories, even though, like, if you put that same pitching staff in a points league, that would probably be a contender, but it's not in the roto league because the bad starts have dragged me down so much in the pitching categories, and I find that frustrating.
All right, let's move on to this Braves Phillies series. Has been really fun so far. We've had some comeback games and a bunch of home runs being hit. Stop me if you've heard this before. Trea Turner and Bryce Harper, they both did it again. Trea Turner 3 for 5 with a sock and a shoe. His 26th home run, his 27th steal, updated numbers since that ovation on August 4th, 34 games. Trea Turner's batting .388 with 16 home runs, 41 RBI, and 6 steals. This was a fun stat per Opta Stats on Twitter as well. Trea Turner is the first player in MLB history to have at least 11 home runs and 11 multi-hit games over a 13-game span.
Wow.
Crazy.
That is unprecedented hot streak. Wow.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And we were talking beforehand. I said, there's a chance he's going to wind up with the numbers we were expecting this year. Probably not in the batting average if you were expecting like a 300, but if you were expecting 280, he might get there, and he might get 30-30. He probably, think in this environment, he could steal 40, 50 plus bases, but a 30-30, home run steal season with a 280 batting average.
Yeah.
Still pretty good. It's
still pretty good.
Yeah.
It's not, he was drafted number 1 overall in some leagues, so it would still be disappointing relative to that, I would say. But
especially if you took him over Ronald Acuna, my God.
Well, if you took anybody over Ronald Acuna,
Yeah.
It's a disappointment, which, unfortunately I did in multiple leagues. I had the first pick, took Judge. So, oops. But I didn't take Trea Turner. No, I mean, he's done a lot to salvage his value for next year, I would say. And we've had this conversation a lot during this hot streak. Like, where do we draft him? I still think, round 1-2 turn is probably going to be the appropriate place. Lower than that in points leagues. My main concerns with Trea Turner are, will he ever get back to being a batting average standout? Because, some of his plate discipline numbers, not so much the surface level strikeout rate and walk rate, but, in terms of swings and misses in the zone, out of the zone, against fastballs, all that have gotten worse. And so is that going to prevent him from being a 300 hitter again? Is he more like the 270 hitter, which he has now gotten his season mark up to? And will he be, before he was one of a handful of true league winner base stealers? And is he just a good base stealer now, as opposed to that in this new environment? And both of those would change his appeal in fantasy enough to drop him a full round, I would say. But, he's proven he's still a really good asset.
This could be a slippery slope, but I'm already kind of talking myself into it that the first 4 months of the season, he was just pressing, first year of a mega contract in, look, at times a hostile location in Philadelphia. So I could see that being the reason. And then boom, August hit and the guy just took off and he was awesome. Uh, if this is any indication of what we might see next year, I mean, I think there's a chance he could still hit maybe well over 300. And even if he's not stealing, the 40 or 50 bags, the counting stats in this lineup, the upside, I think, is still pretty high. So,
Yeah.
that's just
One
my
thing
early lean, I guess.
One thing I want to do when I have more time, probably after the season ends and I'm putting together my rankings for next year, is dig deeper on those plate discipline numbers and see if they improved while everything else improved. And maybe that would feed into that theory that he was just pressing at the start of a new contract. And it wasn't so much the fact that he's getting older, 30 years old now. So I'll dig into that and I'll see if my feelings about him come out any different. But yeah, I think right now I'm leaning that he's more like a 270, 280 hitter than a 300 to 320 hitter.
All right, his teammate Bryce Harper went 2 for 3 with 2 walks and his 17th home run. And in the second half, he's batting .303 with 14 homers, 4 steals, and a 15% barrel rate. Another day, another 3 home runs for the Atlanta Braves. Matt Olson 2 for 4 with his 51st home run that ties the Braves single season record. And barring something catastrophic happening, I would assume Matt Olson is going to break that record for the Braves. Ronald Acuna 1 for 5, another home run, his 37th of the season, and Marcell Ozuna 2 for 5 rather, with his 34th home run of the year. Before we get into some waiver wire pitchers, Scott, let's quickly take a look at John Means' season debut. A fan favorite of this, I guess not a fan favorite, just a favorite of this podcast for the past couple of years.
Certainly of mine, yes.
Happy to see him back on the mound. He was facing the Cardinals in his debut here. 5 innings, 3 runs allowed, only 1 strikeout to 0 walks. Did allow 2 home runs. He is a fly ball pitcher. But overall, I mean, didn't allow too much hard contact. It was 85.7 average exit velocity. That's actually pretty good. Velocity was close to where it was back in 2021. That was his breakout season. The pitch mix was a little bit changed here. Scott, what did you see from John Means, and would you have any faith in starting him? His last 3 starts are at the Astros, at the Guardians, and home against the Red Sox.
And unfortunately, the Astros and Guardians are going to come in the same week, right? So unfortunately, you can't wait to see how he does against the Astros to then get the good matchup against the Guardians if it goes well. That would have been the ideal scenario, the most likely scenario in which I would start John Means. It was a mixed bag, kind of like Edward Cabrera. When I just saw the stat line, the 1 strikeout, the 2 home runs allowed, I thought, oh no. But then when I dug deeper and saw the quality of contact against him was very low, he did have the 8 whiffs on 75 pitches, so better than a 10% swinging strike rate there. 6 of those 8 came on the changeup, which is his best pitch. Even though the changeup was the one that was down the most, 1.4 miles per hour, it still was getting whiffs. And, a harder changeup isn't necessarily a better changeup. So maybe that'll serve him well, it being lower in velocity, or maybe not. Maybe he just needs more time to get his pitches back where we're used to seeing them. But he, if nothing else, showed he can be competitive with what he has right now. And if he continues to show that down the stretch, then I'm going to be excited about John Means as a sleeper for next season. But it's hard to say that I'm going to put much confidence in him over his final 3 matchups.
Yeah, especially for next week too, because those matchups, the Astros and Guardians, it's Jekyll and Hyde against left-handed pitching. The Guardians are the worst team against lefties. The Astros are the second best. And pitching in Houston with that, short porch in left field, it seems pretty scary. So
yeah, kind of opposite layout from Camden Yards, which I've said this before. I feel like the Orioles redesigned their stadium around John Means because it's so perfect for his skill set. I'm sure that's not really what they did, but it just It just seems like it. And now hopefully he'll get a chance to enjoy it because he was around so little of last season after they made those changes.
Yeah. So I think the only way I would use him is if you're like really desperate in a points league for next week, but any type of category league, I think I'm going to stay away here from John Means.
For those daily leagues, I think it's worth. I'm not saying you have to pick him up right now because that Guardians matchup is going to be so fruitful. But if you do have a spot to play with, or if you don't want to make the move yet, you just want to see how that outing against the Astros goes. And if it does go well, then maybe there's a chance you might plug in Means for that start against the Guardians. But it's not the highest of priorities right now, I would say.
All right, let's take our first break. When we return, I've got a bunch of waiver wire pitchers to talk about. We'll do that right after this.
Saturday, the champs are back on CBS and chasing history. Top dog Georgia has their sights set on an unprecedented three-peat. Will the Gamecocks put a dent in their dynasty? South Carolina, Georgia. Saturday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Waiver wire pitchers part 1. This group includes Brian Wu, who had a great start up against the Angels, 5 2/3 shutout innings, 4 hits, 0 walks, 8 strikeouts with 20 swinging strikes on 83 pitches. Cal Quantrill has turned in 3 straight quality starts since returning from the IL. He was at the Giants, 6 innings, 1 run, 3 walks and 2 strikeouts. You don't love that, but really limited the hard contact in this one. He's got a 1.5 ERA and a 1 whip on the nose since returning. And Hyunjin Ryu turned in his first quality start of the season. He was up against the Rangers, 6 innings, 3 runs, 5 strikeouts there. He's allowed 3 earned runs or fewer in 7 of his 8 starts. He's got a 2.93 ERA and a 1.05 whip. Quickly mention the matchups for each of these. Brian Wu is at the A's at Texas, home against Texas. Cal Quantrill is at the Royals, home against the Orioles, and at the Tigers. Hyunjin Ryu is home against the Red Sox, at the Rays, and then home against the Rays. Scott, how are you ranking those 3 with with their skills and their matchups, I guess, over these final 3 starts?
I would rank them Wu, Ryu, Quantrill, which probably means I'm not going to use Quantrill if he's third on this list, even though, 2 of his 3 matchups are against some of the worst offenses in baseball. Just don't trust it. I mean, even I understand he's been a guy who's long outperformed his peripherals, but normally his strikeout rate, as bad as it is, isn't as bad as this. He's striking out nobody right now, and I'd be concerned about a blow up start, especially given that those have been so common for so many pitchers this year. Wu, because especially, well, let me put it this way. That Oakland matchup and that first Texas matchup theoretically will come in the same week, next week. So he'll be a 2-start pitcher next week with one of them at Oakland. And so I think that's going to put him pretty high on the sleeper pitchers list. Obviously, the Texas matchup isn't so favorable, but the Oakland one, I think, hopefully cancels it out. And we've seen a lot of really good starts from Wu just since he returned from the IL. I think he'll be somebody worth picking up for that second to last week of the season. Ryu has been very consistent since coming back from Tommy John surgery. This was the first quality start, but because it was the first start in which he went 6 innings, certainly a lot of the other starts were quality, lowercase q, 2.95 ERA, 1.05 whip. It's just the matchups are not good at all. And let's see, would he line up for 2 starts next week, or would it be the final week where he gets 2 starts? Boston, Tampa, last 3.
I think all 3 of these are going to wind up being 2-star pitchers next week.
So,
but I can try to confirm. On the site, it says Ryu only has 1 start at Tampa next week, so maybe not.
Well, yeah, though it may be. Yeah, I'd have to look into that more, but the matchups might steer me away from Ryu is the bottom line. I think the one of these 3 that I'm most confidently going to recommend in my sleeper pitchers list at some point over the next 2 weeks is Brian Wu.
What do you think of this comp, by the way, Scott? And it's very lofty, but I think Brian Wu kind of reminds me a little bit of Brandon Woodruff, the way that Woodruff relies so heavily on his four-seam fastball and his sinker. He throws those usually a combined 60% of the time. Brian Wu uses his even more, but he does a really good job getting whiffs with both of those pitches. So
Yeah.
he's kind of like a really, really poor man's Brandon Woodruff, I guess.
Well,
But
he
that's the
leaned
upside.
on them even more in this start
Right.
because normally he throws a cutter about as much as those other two, and he hardly used it in this one. He was coming off a bad start. Of the three, the cutter gets hit the hardest. So, maybe it's for the best that he doesn't throw it as much. It certainly worked out for him against a weakened Angels lineup. I don't know. That's an interesting comp. Brandon Woodruff is a pitcher for whom there are few comps. So maybe he's just a unicorn. But, we've seen a lot of good from Brian Wu this year. And I think he probably has a future on some level as a major league pitcher. Whether it's that level, seems unlikely, but not outside the realm of possibility.
All right, let's talk about waiver wire pitchers part 2. Nick Pivetta racked up 10 strikeouts in game 1 of their doubleheader against the Yankees. 5 1/3 innings, 3 runs allowed, 10 strikeouts with 15 swinging strikes. We know that whiffs are not a problem for Nick Pivetta, but walks, home runs, hard contact. If you look at his previous 8 starts, or 8 games rather, because some of those are relief appearances, 5.97 ERA and a 1.53 whip there for Nick Pivetta. Zach Littell has gone 7+ innings in back-to-back starts. He was at the Twins. 7 innings, 3 runs, 8 strikeouts to 0 walks, 12 swinging strikes on 85 pitches for him. And JP Sears turned in a quality start at the Astros. 6 innings, 2 runs, 3 strikeouts. And he's turned in 3 solid starts in a row. But he is just prone to home runs because he gives up so many fly balls and so many barrels. That's JP Sears. I'll quickly mention the matchups. Sears is facing the Mariners, the Tigers, and the Angels. Zach Littell is at the Orioles, home against the Blue Jays, and at the Blue Jays. So, I don't know. Those are kind of like middling. I actually didn't write down Nick Pavetta's, but I'll look it up now. What do you think, Scott?
Well, Nick Pivetta, he may not. So this was his first start in, let me see here. I wrote it down. This was his first start in 5 outings.
And it was a doubleheader. So
And it was a doubleheader, exactly.
Maybe he's not even going to start,
That's what I was getting at. I'm looking at his roster resource page, and they do have him as one of the Red Sox 5 starting pitchers right now. So he could, but it's hard to know exactly when he's going to slot in and how often. So just to give his remaining matchups, I think is fraught. So yeah, he would be the least interesting. Well, I don't know. I guess he's more interesting than JP Sears. None of them are that interesting, though, I guess is the bottom line. Because Zach Littell, okay, back-to-back good starts. Him getting 8 strikeouts in 7 innings, I think that was a product of facing the Twins lineup, who one of the most strikeout-prone lineups in the history of baseball. So starts like this can happen against it. I think he's a pretty middling pitcher, though. Certainly the ERA estimators point to that. I mean, the actual ERA does as well. And then the fact is matchups, Orioles, Blue Jays to close out the season. I'm not going to get excited about any of those 3. So he's probably the most usable of these 3 pitchers for fantasy, Zach Littell, but he's still not that usable in my estimation.
All right, 2 names in much deeper leagues. Bailey Falter turned in a strong start against the Nationals. 6 innings, 1 run, 4 strikeouts there. And Jose Butto plays for the Mets, by the way. He had a solid start against the Diamondbacks. 5 innings, 1 run, 7 strikeouts with 17 swinging strikes. And he's 25 years old. His career in the minors, a 3.86 ERA and a 1.26 whip, just below a strikeout per inning. I don't think there's too much there, but this would probably have to be, NL only leagues or super deep leagues. Got any enthusiasm for either of those 2?
I mean, I liked what Butto did in this start. I don't know where it came from. His minor league numbers this year were dreadful. And so 5.93 ERA, 163 WHIP, 8.1 K per nine at AAA for Jose Butto. Back-to-back good starts in the majors, and this one he got a ton of whiffs, 13 of the 17 on the changeup. But I am not convinced this is who Jose Butto actually is.
All right, let's slide over to the waiver wire hitters. And Davis Schneider is a name that we've talked a lot about recently, and he just keeps on doing his thing. 2 for 4 with his 8th home run. He's now played 25 games with the Blue Jays where he's batting .370 with a .500 on base percentage, 8 home runs, a .1315 OPS. He's 62% rostered, has second base and third base eligibility. I was going to pull up the matchups for next week. I don't think it really matters. It's just if you need a second or third baseman or a utility bat, whatever it might be, get this guy on your team. He's really good.
Yeah. Now that Davis Schneider's another one featured in, going to be featured in that article about players to pick up for championship week. Even if you don't need help at second and third base, you just don't want him to be the player who brings you down, because the way he's going now, he could be. Maybe he cools off. Maybe he goes totally silent over the final 2 weeks, but I wouldn't want to take the chance of, I wouldn't be the one. I wouldn't, my bet on that, it would be like, it doesn't feel like a strong enough bet to leave him out there, I guess. And I think there's a chance Davis Schneider is just a really good hitter. I mean, his minor league production was great. You look at the numbers, the underlying numbers, a big part of what makes him so successful, and in spite of modest exit velocities, is just he hardly ever puts the ball on the ground. A lot of fly balls, a lot of line drives. Fly balls come with a high pull rate, which gets them over the fence. It worked for him at AAA Buffalo. It's translated to the majors. He draws a ton of walks on top of it, which is why he has that .500 on base percentage. Like, his batted ball profile is not all that dissimilar from Mookie Betts historically. Mookie Betts' exit velocities are actually up quite a bit this year. So I don't know where that came from for Betts, but like the typical Betts season isn't that different from the underlying numbers, aren't that different from Davis Schneider. I'm not saying Davis Schneider is going to be Mookie Betts. That would be a ridiculous bet, but is he good enough to be a full-timer in the major leagues? I'm feeling pretty good about that right now.
And have you seen the guy's picture? It's amazing. Look at the mustache on that guy. He's got the rec specs on and everything. Dude, guy is awesome, Scott. What would we have to do? I feel like you and I, we need to make some kind of bet. Oh, well, we are playing against each other in the podcast points league for the chance to go to the finals. So
I think Davis Schneider's out there still, isn't he?
If I win, you have to grow a Davis Schneider mustache. And if you win, I don't know, you could choose something for me to do. I'll shave my face.
I mean, isn't the winning and losing enough? Isn't that enough? Why do we need to attach additional stakes to this? I'm afraid if I do that, my wife won't look at me for the whole time I have it, much less anything else. So I would rather not bet on that, Frank. I'm sorry if that makes me unfun, but it's not worth it. That kind of fun isn't worth it to me. Sorry.
Oh man, I'm rooting for Davis Schneider. He's a New Jersey kid from here in the Northeast. Let's go, Davis Schneider. He's my new man crush. I'm going for Davis Schneider. Let's go. 2 middle infielders that could be out there. 2 rookies. Edouard Julien, 1 for 3 with his 12th home run. Just his second home run since July 28th. So he has slowed down quite a bit here. Batting .273 with a .383 on base percentage. He's got a 15% walk rate this season. The problem, he also has a 31% strikeout rate, and he has been dreadful against left-handed pitching. Ronnie Mauricio went 1 for 4 with his first career home run. A moonshot, 112.4 exit velocity, 440 feet in the highest deck that they have in Citi Field. It was a majestic home run. And now in his first 10 games, Ronnie Mauricio batting .306 with 1 homer, 4 steals, a .786 OPS. Who would you prefer between these two, Scott? Edouard Julien and Ronnie Mauricio?
I'd prefer Julien, but they're both going to be pretty matchups dependent. What's interesting is the Twins might have the most favorable hitter schedule remaining. but it looks like there are a lot of left-handers in all the rotations they're facing. So it'll probably be irrelevant for whether or not you use Edward Julian. Certainly not irrelevant for whether you use Royce Lewis, whose roster rate is up over 80% now, but he could be a league winner down the stretch, I think. And Jorge Polanco, currently away on paternity leave, I think it is. But he's healthy and has been hitting well and can take advantage of those good matchups. But as for your actual question, I don't think either's going to be so usable down the stretch. Just in a vacuum, I prefer Julian to Mauricio. Unless you need steals, obviously Mauricio is going to give you more of those.
Yeah. For Julian, the problem, as you mentioned, he's got 6 games next week with 4 lefties on the schedule as of now. And he straight up just hasn't been playing against left-handed pitching. So how many games is he going to play next week? Like 2 or 3? So I think that could be a problem. These are more so, middle infielders in a roto league at this point. I really like Mauricio. I think I would go with him. I don't want to get sucked in too much, but so far I was just thinking out loud. I think he's going to be a great sleeper for next year. Ronnie Mauricio hits the ball hard, power and speed.
Yeah.
Has some good prospect pedigree. He's lowered the strikeout rate this year. I think there's a lot to like with Ronnie.
So there is a sentiment that he's an overrated prospect, but when I see how hard he hits the ball,
it's amazing.
To rehash it, in case you weren't listening to that podcast when he debuted, his first at bat in the majors, he hit a ball harder than any Met has all season, including
or even last season.
Yeah. And then this home run, he hit it 112 miles per hour, which is something, Zach Geloff has not hit a single ball 112 miles per hour, or even within 3 miles per hour of that. A lot of hitters haven't this year. And so that speaks to Ronnie Mauricio's upside. Is he going to have, is he going to get buried by quality breaking balls? I think that's the biggest concern. He chases too much. But that can be overcome. And just from a pure talent perspective, I think Mauricio has a lot of it.
All right. 3 names in deeper leagues. Willie Castro went 1 for 3 with his 7th home run. And in 9 games since returning to the Twins, he's got a .393 batting average, 2 homers and 2 steals. He started 8 straight for them. 29% rostered. He has second base, third base, shortstop, and outfield eligibility. DJ Stewart went 3 for 5 with a double and a run scored. He's played 43 games with the Mets now. He's batting .281 with 11 home runs and a .997 OPS. The expected numbers are not as good as the actual numbers, but they're still really good. He hits the ball really hard. The problem with him, he doesn't play against lefties either. And then Ceddanne Rafaela went 2 for 5 with his first career home run. He's played 13 games now with the Red Sox. I would imagine most of those are as a defensive replacement or a pinch runner. .345, 1 homer, 1 steal, a .939 OPS. Has started 3 straight for the Red Sox. How would you rank those in terms of your interest rest of season? Willie Castro, DJ Stewart, and Rafaela.
Not sure I'm that interested in any of them.
Yeah, these are more, 5 outfielder leagues, 12-team roto, maybe even deeper than that.
Yeah, it'd have to be deeper than that. If the playing time was more consistent for Rafaela, he would be my top choice. He started both games of the doubleheader today, 1 at shortstop, 1 in center field. And that's an interesting combo. But yeah, the Red Sox haven't been that committed to starting him. And so I'm not convinced that's going to change just because they wanted to give, Trevor Story a day off in a doubleheader, a game off. DJ Stewart, he has power and he hasn't slowed down yet. I keep thinking it's going to happen. A 29-year-old with a really unimpressive history in his previous major league opportunities. We have seen him go on home run binges in the majors prior to this year, but then he would fall off pretty quickly. And I'm just expecting that to happen at some point. Probably the time you activate him is when it's going to happen, just because that's the way these things go. The Mets matchups to close out the season aren't particularly favorable for hitters. So I'm going to say DJ Stewart's the most usable because he has that standout skill, but I don't think he's actually that usable.
All right, let's quickly run through some news and notes. Max Scherzer was pulled from his start due to a right tricep spasm, and he recently dealt with tightness in his forearm a few weeks back. Kind of feels like he's walking this tightrope right now, Scott, with all these different injuries. And we've seen a bunch of stuff over the years: back, neck. This year it was forearm, triceps now too. I mean, I hope he's all right, but I really don't know what's going to happen here with him.
I mean, he has a lot of mileage on that arm, that now 39-year-old arm that he throws, he throws 98 miles per hour with a weird angle and has a lot of mileage on it. So it stands to reason that he may be on the verge of breaking down physically. And it comes at a bad time for the Rangers, obviously, to leaving back-to-back starts with health concerns. Not sure how that's going to work for them in the postseason. Hopefully he bounces back. But in terms of how we target Max Scherzer next season, Scherzer and Verlander both. And I was probably one of the most sanguine fantasy baseball analysts about their age coming into the season, but they both have shown, I think, pretty even clearer signs of their age this year than they did last year. And so I think you'll want to approach them with extreme caution. And I will probably rank them within the glob as opposed to ahead of the glob, pretty high up in the glob. But I'm not going to be treating them like aces next year.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Shohei Ohtani was out again Tuesday, marking his 9th straight game missed due to right oblique tightness. Kenley Jansen left the second game of their doubleheader due to fatigue and illness symptoms. Clayton Kershaw is expected to make his next start Saturday in Seattle. His last start was skipped as he battles shoulder issues. Yu Darvish has officially been shut down for the rest of the season due to a bone spur in his right elbow. Yandy Diaz exited Tuesday night after fouling a ball off of the family jewels. I guess we can go with that one, Scott. Insert whichever.
I mean, I don't know what's wrong with saying testicles. I don't know. I don't know why legitimate news sources are so afraid to say that. It's not vulgar. It's just, I don't know. I don't get it, but that's what happened. Yes. And hopefully he's okay. And, Lars Nootbaar went on the IL with a similar injury just a few weeks ago. So I wouldn't just laugh it off, but hopefully he's okay. Hopefully Yandy Diaz is okay.
No, this is no laughing matter indeed. Wilson Contreras was removed with a right hand contusion. O'Neal Cruz will not return this season and will shift his focus to 2024 instead. He had surgery back in April to repair a fractured left fibula. Christian Yelich has missed 4 straight with back stiffness. Jeimer Candelario was placed in the IL with a lower back strain. Alexander Canario was recalled, and perhaps this helps Pete Crow Armstrong play a little bit more, Scott.
Yeah, no, I had the same thought. And Pete Crow Armstrong didn't really do anything at the plate in this first start of his, but he made multiple highlight reel catches. Like his defense, his standout defense, he put that on full display right away. And, I saw a couple highlights that left the pitcher on the mound applauding his effort in the outfield. So, like I said, energetic player, like the kind of player that can help propel a team across the finish line, a team that's fighting for a playoff spot across the finish line, just because he has that infectious energy. And yeah, the fact that Jeimer Candelario is on the IL now with his back strain, I think it changes the calculus with regard to Crow Armstrong's playing time, and maybe he'll end up playing a lot more down the stretch than I laid out yesterday. I still don't know that he's going to be worth starting in fantasy, but at least in 5 outfielder leagues, I would say it's not a bad idea to put in a claim for him. I'd be more willing to put in a claim for Pete Crow Armstrong than like DJ Stewart, of that uninspiring trio that we looked at earlier.
All right. Nolan Gorman exited Tuesday with right hamstring tightness. Jose Siri was placed on the IL with a right hand fracture. Curtis Mead was recalled. Luke Raley started in center field, and Jonathan Aranda started at DH. Aranda's actually started 7 of their last 9 games, but hasn't really done much with the opportunity yet. Michael Lorenzen could be moved to the Phillies bullpen as they shift back to a 5-man rotation. Whit Merrifield was out of the lineup due to left groin tightness. Brandon Belt was placed in the IL with lumbar spine muscle spasms. Spencer Horowitz started at first base with Vlad Jr. at designated hitter. Garrett Mitchell, remember the name? The Brewers outfielder is set to meet with a doctor later this week and could be cleared to begin a rehab assignment as soon as this weekend. He had surgery back on May 2nd to repair a left shoulder subluxation. The Dodgers are calling up a pitcher named Kyle Hurt. He's 25 years old and has a ton of strikeouts in the minors, 145 over 88 and a third innings this season. Tons of swinging strikes. I don't know that we're going to add this guy, Scott. I don't know. Maybe if you're in an NL only league and chasing strikeouts, but he's mildly interesting. Kyle Hurt.
Oh yeah. I mean, that kind of strikeout potential is interesting. And if there's any organization that knows how to get the most out of that, it's the Dodgers. I think it's more of a monitor Kyle Hurt for next season situation than rush out and pick him up in fantasy situation. But he's among prospect hounds. He's a noteworthy name.
Last but not least, not fantasy news, but the Mets are hiring David Stearns as their next president of baseball operations. He stepped down with the Brewers last October, and he's been on the Mets' radar for quite some time. So they got their guy, and we'll see what he could do in his first offseason coming up in a couple of months here. A couple of months. Let's take our second break. What am I saying? And when we return, we'll talk about Elly De La Cruz, updated numbers in the second half. He, hasn't been too great. I got some pitching leftovers. We'll do that right after this. Welcome back, and let's talk about Elly De La Cruz, who continues to struggle in the second half. He went 1 for 4 with a walk and 2 runs scored here on Tuesday, and in 54 games post All-Star break, 182 batting average, 7 homers, 10 steals. So the power and speed is still helpful, but that batting average is brutal. A 37% strikeout rate. He's still hitting the ball hard, 92.1 average exit velocity, but a 50% ground ball rate. And something I noticed overall, Scott, just with the splits, he's been terrible against lefties here. And I know they were facing a lefty on Tuesday, and they dropped him down to 7th in the lineup this year against Southpaws. He's batting 188 with a 509 OPS. So just, I guess, a reminder here that he's very clearly not a finished product. He's still very young. And I think there's a ton of upside in terms of power and speed for next year. But I think in points leagues, anywhere where you lose points for strikeouts or just where plate discipline matters, I think Elly De La Cruz is going to be there's going to be a huge difference in his draft stock depending on the league format where you're drafting him next year.
Well, maybe. In theory, yes. Normally I would say that. But, and I've pointed this out before with other players, because the stolen base threshold has been raised this year, we're seeing a lot more really prolific base stealers, and Elly De La Cruz is among them. 26 steals in 84 games. That's almost a 50 steal pace over a full season. And so can he steal enough bases to make up for those losses in strikeouts? Because in the standard CBS points format, stolen bases, 2 points apiece. Yes, you lose half a point for every strikeout, but is there enough of the stolen bases to balance that out? And so far in his rookie season, even with him kind of struggling down the stretch here, 2.93 points per game is what he enters with, which is, let's see, who is that comparable to at that position? I mean, it's well ahead of Xander Bogaerts and Dansby Swanson. It's ahead of Bo Bichette even. So I think, I think that might be overstated, given, provided your points league awards 2 points per stolen base.
Gotcha. Is there any actual concern with how bad he's been in the second half for next year?
I mean, I think the idea of him being a first round pick has certainly gone out the window. And when we did that exercise yesterday where you were reading off where some players went in your early mock draft, I think Elly De La Cruz went 25th overall in that. And I said it was too early. Not by much. That was the one I struggled with the most, but it matters to that extent. I don't think Elly De La Cruz is going to be a bum next year or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I'm just thinking about it now. Like we already have a few wild cards for next season. Otani, is he going to have Tommy John surgery? How is that going to affect when he plays next season? I think Fernando Tatis, with how bad he's kind of finished out the year here, and he really has only had one exceptional month, and that was back in June. I think he's kind of a tough player to evaluate for next year, and I think Elly De La Cruz is maybe not to that level. Those guys are borderline first round picks when everything is going right for them. But, is he a second rounder? Is he a third rounder? I think there's going to be some fun conversations around Elly De La Cruz.
Yeah, with Fernando Tatis, I've been thinking about that a lot lately because his OPS for the year now is below 800.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, really one standout month. I saw somebody share an article written by, oh gosh, am I going to say the wrong one? Jeff Zimmerman of Fangraphs. Did I get the right Jeff?
He does work for Fangraphs, but I haven't seen the article, so I don't know.
Okay. So he kind of went through the history of a torn labrum, of having that surgery on the shoulder for hitters, and the drop in power, which isn't universal, but it's widespread enough that it might explain what's going on with Fernando Tatis now, because shoulder, it's a complicated joint. It moves. It's notoriously difficult to operate on. And so regaining the mobility in that, it's not always regained fully, or sometimes it takes time. It's maybe more of a variable than we gave credit for coming into the year. It might explain the struggles he's had this year, and it might not get better. And then there's also, the wrinkle of the PED suspension. How much was that helping him to the numbers he put up in 2019 and previously, or was 2019, whatever year it was. I think it's fair to wonder that. So I'm not, after reading that, I'm more inclined to consider Fernando Tatis now a late first rounder. I was kind of leaning more early first round, like, okay, let's give him a pass for them first year off of injury. It sounds like Chris Towers, that's what he's thinking. He's making the comparison to Ronald Acuna, his first year back from surgery. And obviously he's looked a lot better his second year back. It could certainly go that way for Fernando Tatis too. But I think the questions with Tatis and the disappointing production this year are even bigger than they were for Acuna coming off last year.
All right. Yeah. Well said. It's going to be a lot to kind of figure out, and I guess decide which side do you fall on here when it comes to Fernando Tatis in 2024.
It is Jeff Zimmerman. I got the right Jeff.
All right. Let's do a little bit of rapid fire here and wrap up with some fringy starting pitchers here. Starters sit over their final 3 starts. Good old Dylan Cease. So far, so good, Scott. I know you said you'd be all right using him this week in the 2-start week. He was up against the Royals, 5 1/3 innings, 1 run, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts with 14 swinging strikes. He has 1 walk or fewer in just 7 of 30 starts this season. So when he can keep the walks down, I think he has a chance to actually be pretty solid here. And I just realized I didn't write down the starts for Dylan Cease. So talk about this one, and then I'll figure out who he's facing.
I don't know what to do with Dylan Cease. Obviously this start was against the Royals, so how much does it really count? The previous 8 starts for Dylan Cease, like, he had rendered himself unusable. Previous 8 starts, a 7.65 ERA, a 1.95 WHIP. Is he back? Is he back? Can we trust he's back because he did this against the Royals?
No.
I know he was lined up for 2 starts this week, and I had him as a recommended start because the matchups were good enough in the 2-star week. If it didn't work out this week, we'd probably be done with him for the rest of the season. But I'm more like breathing a sigh of relief that it worked out well than like, oh yeah, Dylan Cease is back. I knew it all along. That's kind of my take on it. And I'm not sure I want to use him with only, let's see. So the 1 start he lines up for next week is against the Twins, you're saying?
No,
what you just wrote in here?
It looks like it's at Boston. That second.
Oh no, the second start this week is the Twins.
And
okay,
so
that's
Boston.
Part of the reason why I liked him. Next week at Boston for 1 start, and the final week against the Padres. I'm disinclined to use Cease unless he just, looks amazing against the Twins. Maybe I'll rethink it. But yeah, I mean, it's been a lot more bad than good lately from him.
All right, we will cease to use Dylan. Carlos Rodon bounced back with a solid start at the Red Sox. 5 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts to 4 walks, 16 swinging strikes on 93 pitches. The velocity was way up in this one. Slider up 1.8 miles per hour. The curve was up 2 miles per hour. And are you kidding me? I didn't write down the starts for him either. Scott, what do you think about Carlos Rodon?
Bad job, Frank.
What am I doing?
I mean, I'm interested in reading what is said about this start for Carlos Rodon. There wasn't anything out there as of the time we recorded, because the velocity was way up, less so on the fastball than the other pitches, but it was up. And this was his most dominant start since coming back. 9 strikeouts in 5 innings, and this was his second start in 4 where he's looked like a genuine bat misser. For the most part, he hasn't. So did he turn the corner here? There's a chance, but just looking at data alone, I don't feel confident saying one way or another. Like, it has to start somewhere. This may be the start of it, but I'd like to hear if there's some kind of explanation for the velocity being up, if you approach this start differently. Who's he got? Is Pittsburgh this week? Is the Pittsburgh matchup this week?
Yep.
So he's already locked in for that Pittsburgh matchup. And then the final 2 weeks, it'll be the Diamondbacks and the Blue Jays, respectively, which are middling. Let's see how he does against the Pirates in that second start.
I'll say this. If you rolled the dice on the 2-star week, you feel pretty good so far because, at the Pirates this weekend, hopefully it should go well. Last start against the Tigers did not go so well. Michael Wacha was hit hard at the Dodgers. He allowed 7 runs over 4 innings, and he's really struggled over his last 4 starts, giving up a ton of runs. He has 13 walks over 19 1/3 innings during that time. His last 3 starts are home against the Rockies, home against the Cardinals, at the White Sox. So I might have made the argument that you could drop Michael Wacha, Scott, but 2 of those 3 matchups are pretty good. Rockies on the road and at the White Sox.
Yeah. I mean, another frustrating case. In a way, you could argue we should have seen it coming with Wacha because the ERA estimators are all like mid-4s, but he he was so reliable all of last season, had been so reliable this season prior to these most recent starts. So you get comfortable. You get comfortable and think he's just going to do that forever. And so should we punish a blip like this harder for somebody like Michael Wacha than for somebody like, any other pitcher it happens to? I don't know. It's been happening to everybody, like we've been saying. Is the Rockies starting the second start this week, or is it the first start next week? Does Wacha line up for 2 starts next week?
Let me see. I could pull that up rather quickly here, hopefully, but I think he's going to wind up as a 2-starter next week.
Yeah, I don't remember him being in my 2-star rankings this week.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. 2 starts for next week.
So we got to make this decision. Rockies Cardinals next week. Are we going to use Wacha? Eileen, yes, right now. It's easier to say in a points league than in a categories league where you probably have to consider what categories are more important to you. But Eileen, yes, 2 starts, even as rough as Wacha's last 2 starts have been.
Everything comes full circle, which means we've got to talk about Lance Lynn, a quality start up against the Padres. 7 innings, 2 runs, 3 strikeouts in this one. He was at 100 pitches through 6, and he came out for the 7th and managed to get through 1 final inning there. And in 8 starts with the Dodgers, he has a 4.60 ERA, a 1.26 WHIP. He leads baseball with 41 home runs allowed. Last year, Josiah Gray led baseball with 38 homers allowed. Lance Lynn still has 3 starts left where he can add to this terrible lead. But the matchups are kind of good, man. Last 3 versus the Tigers versus the Giants at the Giants.
Mm-hmm. I hate to keep asking you this, but okay, so it looks like
I don't think he was actually he might be a 2-star pitcher this week.
I think he's a 2-star pitcher next week if you're saying his next matchup is against the Tigers.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. It's next week.
Points league only. Points league only for Lance Lynn with those good matchups against the Tigers and Giants next week.
All right, fair enough. A quick hitting leftover here. Freddie Freeman, 4 for 5 with his 26th home run and 55th double of the season. And it came on his birthday. Happy birthday, Freddie Freeman, 34 years old today. He is now batting .339 with 26 homers, 18 steals, 121 runs scored, and a .995 OPS on the year. Fantastic season.
I want to see him get those 2 more steals. I want Freddie Freeman to be a 2020 player.
They were talking on the broadcast. I mean, this is lofty. I don't think he'll be able to get there, but if somehow he can get to 30 homers, 60 doubles, 20 steals, oof.
I just got to go on a power binge here. Like
Oof.
an incredible power binge. No, he's at 26 home runs. Doesn't have to be that incredible. He could hit 4 home runs in 2.5 weeks' time.
He could.
That's not crazy.
He kind of slowed down before this, so I mean, I think there's a chance. But man, that would be awesome. Great season for him. Calls to the bullpen. A few updates here for the Yankees in Game 1. Clay Holmes walked 3, but managed to escape with his 19th save. And then in Game 2, Nick Ramirez for the Yankees pitched a clean 9th inning for his first save of the season. For the White Sox in Game 1 of their doubleheader, Gregory Santos recorded the final 4 outs for his 5th save. Brian Shaw had got the previous save for the White Sox. For the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley pitched a clean 9th inning for his 9th save, and he has back-to-back saves for the Cardinals. For the Rangers, Aroldis Chapman got the 9th inning with a 4-run lead. He gave up a solo homer to Davis Schneider, friend of the podcast. Aroldis Chapman struck out 2 in that outing. For the Braves, Raisel Iglesias entered the 9th with a 1-run lead. He gave up a solo home run to Trea Turner. That was the Raisel Iglesias' 4th blown save of the year. Brad Hand would eventually pick up his first save in the 10th inning for the Braves. For the Phillies on the other side, Craig Kimbrell was called upon in the top of the 10th. He gave up a hit, so the Manfred man scored, and Kimbrell took his 6th loss of the season. For the Reds, Alexis Diaz pitched a clean 9th inning with the game tied, and he wound up with the win. Eventually, Buck Farmer picked up his 3rd save in extra innings. For the Mets, Adam Ottavino recorded the final 5 outs for his 10th save. He's 21% rostered, more of a deep league name, but if you are looking for saves there. For the Twins, Yoan Duran pitched a clean 9th inning for his 26th save of the year. And I mean, there was some concern coming in that, the Twins haven't traditionally used a closer, but Duran has basically been the guy, and he's got great ratios and all these strikeouts, and he's approaching 30 saves. So pretty awesome season for him. For the Brewers, Devin Williams struck out 1 for his 33rd save. For the Royals, Carlos Hernandez got the 9th inning with a 2-run lead. He gave up 1 run, but picked up his 4th save. And then for the Rockies, one night after, I believe his name is Tyler Kinley, took the loss. Justin Lawrence was back in there. He struck out 2 for his 11th save of the year. To stream or not to stream on Wednesday, we got some pretty good options here. Logan Allen at the Giants, Kyle Harrison versus the Guardians. We have Mike Clevenger against the Royals and Ryan Pepio against the Padres.
Yeah, I don't mind any of those 4. I would rank them Pepio number 1. Logan Allen 2, just because the Giants are the Guardians are so bad against lefties too. Harrison's the higher upside play than Logan Allen. But I'll go Pepio 1. What the heck? Harrison 2, Allen 3, and Clevenger kind of a distant 4th.
All right. And then on Thursday, we have Josiah Gray at the Pirates, Reese Olson versus the Reds, Michael King at the Red Sox, and anybody else? Not really. It's a smaller slate. We've got 9 games on Thursday. Any of those 3?
No.
Michael King has pitched well, but
he has. I would be most likely to use him. I mean, if it's a points league situation, you can slot him in a relief pitcher spot. That feels like a cheat code. By the way, Michael King lines up for 2 starts the final week of the season, so he might be worth picking up just to keep him around for that.
Adrian Hauser is going up against the Marlins. Can I interest you in that?
It's not getting better. And Reese Olson Boston against the Reds is probably my second choice, though I'm not thrilled with it.
Okay.
I'm not thrilled with any of Thursday's options. I'm
All
not
right.
thrilled with any streaming options ever, Frank. No, really, Wednesday's not that bad. But generally speaking, I'm not thrilled with any of our streaming options. Any of your streaming options that you single out for us, Frank?
Hey, they're not mine. I don't play in a single daily lineup league, so solely for the listeners out there. We're going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.